Welcome to the Stoned Templar.
Hey there, welcome back. In previous videos, I touched on ancient aliens, evolution, primal theology, and the Emerald Tablets. At first blush, these topics might appear to have nothing to do with the Knights Templar. However, disinformation about the Templars has been promulgated and repeatedly regurgitated. Amidst vigorous speculation, their history and rationale are poorly understood. Our mission is to get into the head of the Templars, to explore the jungle of their mind, to discern what their modus operandi was, and who human Hughes Depains was. To do this, it's necessary to understand Genesis, which, as you will learn, makes these topics most relevant. The Templars came into possession of something powerful, something desirable. What was it? Could it be, as Chrétien de Troyes, Wolfram von Aschenbach, and Julius Evola imply, that it was indeed the Emerald Tablets, the Philosopher's Stone, the Holy Grail? Yes. What is the Philosopher's Stone, really? There are previously discussed clues in its mythos. What it boils down to is that the stone, the Emerald Tablets, the Grail, is about transformation. Physical and spiritual transformation. Transformation of time and space. Transformation of existence. Transformation of consciousness. Its essence is universal oneness, knowing ourselves, enlightenment. The premise of this presentation is to stimulate critical thinking and conversations that generate ideas for solutions, to scientifically validate or refute what's presented on the Philosopher's Stone's viability. What we will attempt to address are the physics of what the stone is, its functionality, and how it addresses the four properties of transformation in accordance with energy, vibration, and frequency. Consciousness, it's the final frontier. This video is going to get deep, so you may want to put on your chest waders before getting into this lengthy, fast-flowing stream. Be prepared for some of this material to fly over your head like a space shuttle. We're going to begin with an overview of the stone, touch on alchemy, the space-time continuum, the elixir of life, consciousness, and close with travel to an undiscovered country. To quote Nikola Tesla, if you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. The principle of energy, frequency, and vibration states that everything in the universe is made up of energy that vibrates at different frequencies. The different frequencies of vibration create the different forms and phenomena that we see in the universe, from the smallest subatomic particles to the largest galaxies. By understanding the energy, frequencies, and spiritual vibrations, we can elevate our consciousness. Energy is the basic building block of the universe. Everything in the universe is made up of energy, including our thoughts, emotions, and physical bodies. And all energy vibrates at different frequencies. The frequency of vibration determines the form and properties of the energy. Energy embodies the Hermetic principle of mentalism, whereby the all is part of everything and everything is part of the all. Frequency is the rate at which something vibrates. The higher the frequency, the faster the vibration. Vibration is the motion of an object back and forth or up and down. It is caused by the transfer of energy from one object to another. Spiritual vibration refers to the quality and resonance level of our energy field, influenced by our thoughts, emotions, and spiritual practices. Higher spiritual vibrations are associated with positive emotions, love, and enlightenment. Lower vibrations correlate with negative emotions, fear, and limited consciousness. Richard P. Feynman is quoted as saying, "Trying to understand the way nature works involves a most terrible test of human reasoning ability. It involves subtle trickery, beautiful tightropes of logic on which one has to walk in order not to make a mistake in predicting what will happen. The quantum mechanical and the relativity ideas are examples of this." I'm confident this applies to the Philosopher's Stone, as does Feynman's blackboard quote at the time of his death. "What I cannot create, I do not understand." Legends pertaining to the Philosopher's Stone are shrouded by the mists of time. Zosimus of Panopolis, also known as Zosimus the Alchemist, was an Egyptian alchemist and Gnostic mystic who wrote about it in about 300 AD. Other alchemists, such as Elias Ashmole, claim its history originates with Adam, who obtained it from God. It's also alluded to in Psalm 118 of the Bible as the rejected cornerstone of King Solomon's temple. Zosimus described creation of the Philosopher's Stone as working with prima materia, or first matter. Prima materia is the primitive, formless base of all matter, like chaos. It's the material that fills the celestial world above the terrestrial sphere. Esoteric alchemists compared prima materia to the concept of anima mundi, also known as the universal soul or breath of God. Anima mundi suggests that there is an intrinsic connection between all living things, as the soul is connected to the body. The process of working with prima materia is known as the magnum opus, or great work. In the Hermetic tradition, it describes spiritual transmutation as chemical color changes occurring in a laboratory. Birds, such as ravens, phoenixes, peacocks, and swans, are symbolic of progression through the colors of the black, red, and white aspects of the stone. The Philosopher's Stone is also referred to as the elixir of life, symbolizing perfection and enlightenment. It's used for rejuvenation and to achieve immortality. As such, the Philosopher's Stone is a symbolic alchemical marriage of our celestial mind and our terrestrial physical body, bound by the energy of our spirit. This alchemical marriage requires change, transmutation, attained during a quest for perfection. To comprehend the stone, we must have a strong foundation properly oriented in the 7 arts and sciences, the 7 universal principles, and in the alchemical process. Acquisition of such knowledge removes the construct and the constraints imposed by paradigms of entrenched attitudes, beliefs, and values, opening our minds, changing us and our worldview. It's a process that opens our eyes and ears so that we may recognize truth in our hearts and have the experiential wisdom to be circumspect in its application. We must learn to look within ourselves. This is exemplified in the previously discussed alchemical motto of vitriol. Another Latin motto used by alchemists when referring to the Philosopher's Stone was mente videbar, meaning, by the mind I shall be seen. It's possible that the stone was created and regularly used at some point in the distant past by the ancients, but knowledge of its creation and use was lost, giving rise to an odyssey of recollection obfuscated by mystics and alchemists, further conflated by existential speculation. As Europe migrated from the Dark Ages to the Middle Ages, emerging into the light of the Renaissance, the alchemical search for the unified field, for the Philosopher's Stone, came to the fore as a nostalgic quest for the legendary Holy Grail. Notable medieval alchemists include prominent figures such as Nicholas Flamel, Sir George Ripley, Dr. John Dee, Edward de Vere, the 17th Earl of Oxford, Sir Francis Bacon, Christopher Kit Carlo, Count Michael Meyer, Robert Flood, Robert Boyle, Sir Isaac Newton, etc. If the stone doesn't exist, if it isn't real, if its seemingly magical properties are nothing more than fantasy, then why did these intelligent and respected men invest so much time and effort, risking everything, in pursuit of its creation? Nicholas Flamel tells us what the stone is in his hieroglyphical figures when he writes, "Our stone hath semblably to a man a body, soul, and spirit. I would only that thou note well, that as a man endued with a body, soul, and spirit is notwithstanding but one, so likewise thou hast now but only one white confection, in which nevertheless there are a body, a soul, and a spirit, which are inseparably united." In perhaps his best-known book, Atlanta Fusions, Count Michael Meyer proposes alchemical solutions to the Philosopher's Stone using sacred geometry. Accompanied by Emblem 21, Meyer metaphorically describes creating the stone thus: "Make of a man and woman a circle, then a quadrangle, out of this a triangle. Make again a circle, and you will have the stone of the wise. Thus is made the stone, which thou canst not discover unless you, through diligence, learn to understand this geometrical teaching." Dr. John Dee was very much involved with creation of the Philosopher's Stone. He demonstrated his knowledge and understanding of the stone as a variation of the M8 doctrine. In an alchemically expanded version of the Yakut hieroglyph, he alludes to it in his Monas Hieroglyphica. Notice that Dee's Monas Hieroglyphica incorporates the 7 universal laws, the 3 immutable laws of mentalism, correspondence, and vibration, and the 4 mutable laws of polarity, rhythm, cause and effect, and gender. These laws integrate to form a double helix with the 7 arts and sciences comprised of the trivium, which is grammar, rhetoric, and dialectic, and the quadrivium, which is mathematics, geometry, music, and astronomy, represented as chakras emanating from the Kundalini, exemplified by as a caduceus. Dee's Monas Hieroglyphica is brilliant in its simplicity. In one regard, its alchemy symbolism refers to quicksilver, mercury, but it also alludes to a specific time at a cryptic location. According to Christine Sarkis, in an article titled The 22 Key Alchemy Symbols and Their Meanings, the alchemy symbol for Mercury represents the mind, as well as a state that could transcend death. In ancient times, Mercury was believed to be able to shift between liquid and solid states. Therefore, in alchemy, Mercury was believed to shift between life and death. Mercury is often represented by a serpent, and its symbol is said to resemble a cosmic womb. It is also sometimes said to represent the passive female principle, as well as wetness and cold. You can see the standard female sign within its symbol. For an alchemical perspective, the modus hieroglyphica represents the fluidity of our mind and its ability to transmute, to change. It also encapsulates the physical and spiritual transformation aspects of the Philosopher's Stone. From the time of the Middle Ages, folks have been fascinated with the Knights Templar, King Arthur, the Knights of the Round Table, and quest for the enigmatic and elusive Holy Grail. Their journeys and adventures symbolize a metamorphic search for the Philosopher's Stone, an expedition into the jungle of inner space located within the depths of our mind. John Dee was enchanted by this idea. Dee actually claimed to be a direct descendant of the Arthurian wizard Merlin and perceived himself as Merlin resurrected. He also perceived his young protege, Sir Francis Bacon, as a ward of Queen Elizabeth I's court as Wart, the boy who would be king, as King Arthur resurrected. Together, Dee envisioned himself, Bacon, and other alchemists such as Kit Marlowe and Edward de Vere, the 17th Earl of Oxford, resurrecting Camelot as a utopic egalitarian society. A story for another day. With regard to the Grail, Dee hints at its location. If we contemplate the Egyptian hieroglyph Akhet, it's alleged to symbolize the sun rising between two hills, the breasts of the supreme mother goddess, Isis. Dee advances this notion, offering additional clues. In one interpretation, if we view the Monas Hieroglyphica as a map in accordance with the symbolism of the M8 doctrine of the primal theology, noting the Vitia Pisces formed by the intersection of the sun and moon symbols on top and the M form symbolizing both water and temple at its base, it seems to be referring to the temple of the Supreme Mother Goddess. As the sun rises in the east, the hills it rises between align to the north and south. However, in Dee's depiction, there's also a Freudian suggestion that west of the hills is a womb, a cave from which water flows. Also, contrasting with the Akhet hieroglyph, the sun is not rising between the hills. It's atop an equilateral cross, suggesting noon during the summer solstice, when the sun is at its highest and is the beauty and glory of the day. Human evolution, as discussed thus far, involved a manipulation of our DNA. But our evolution isn't just physical, it's spiritual within the inner space of our mind that enables us to see and be beyond where we are now. Our mind is a portal providing connectivity and access to other dimensions, threads, and world sheets of the cosmic fabric in pursuit of universal oneness. One use of the stone in the evolutionary process is as a vehicle for physical and spiritual transformation, achieving enlightenment through meditation or prayer. In a nutshell, our body is an electrical system controlled by our brain that acts as a motherboard in a computer or as a servo mechanism. Within our brain is what many refer to as our third eye. Our third eye is comprised of our thalamus, pituitary gland, and pineal gland, functioning as a harmonic generator, controlling our thoughts, our emotions, and our decisions. Think about it this way. Energy is vibration and potential or pressure that conforms with the 7 universal laws: mentalism, vibration, polarity, gender, rhythm, correspondence, and cause and effect. We naturally emit photons, light particles, from our mind. When we chant a mantra, we are harmonizing our body's and mind's vibration, altering their frequency. When we are in tune, our spiritual vibration increases. Therefore, our photons increase and we emit more light. Maximum enlightenment occurs when we achieve harmonic resonance of body, mind, spirit, and soul. 4-part harmony. In this state, we have purged our ego, desire, and the superfluities of life, and are able to spiritually, mentally travel beyond our physical being. It's captured as the 4 points of entry: guttural, pectoral, manual, and pedal, while vocalizing a mantra. When meditating, we sit on the ground cross-legged, hands resting upon our knees, connecting with our feet that are tucked under our knees. As such, we complete a grounded electrical circuit. This electrical circuit is activated when we begin chanting a mantra. Our mantra is vocalized in our throat, which is guttural. The vibration travels down to our breast, which is pectoral, and through our spine, the lower chakras, to ground, as well as through our arms to our hands, which is manual, resting upon our knees to our feet, which is pedal. Simultaneously, the vibration and sound rise from our throat to our ears, where it becomes audible, vibrating in our mind and resonating in our brain. It's an electrical circuit controlled by our third eye, the pineal gland, which is thoughts, pituitary gland, our emotions, and thalamus, which is our decisions, within our brain. It's distributed throughout our body by the wiring of our central nervous system using sympathetic and parasympathetic nerves emanating from the 5 points or chakras of our spinal column, the cervical, thoracic, lumbar, sacral, and coccyx, and is grounded at the base of our spine where the coccyx is. When grounded and harmonized, our mind expands, the third eye opens and increases photon emissions or light that enhances our senses of spirituality, our ability to attain enlightenment and move beyond where we are in the linear moment of now. Electricity flows from our brain through nerves and ganglia in our spinal column. Our spinal column has 33 vertebrae divided into 5 sections: cervical, thoracic, lumbar, sacral, and coccyx. Control points from which nerves extend to various functions of our body. These 5 sections of our spine align with the chakras as entwined serpents on the staff of a caduceus. To understand how this works, we're going to digress to the Garden of Eden for a moment to explain the metaphorical concepts of the serpent, the tree of knowledge, and the tree of life. A serpent has no apparent gender. It has a forked tongue and is perceived as neutral and unemotional and is often hidden. As such, a serpent symbolizes the duality of nature, the tree of knowledge intertwined with the tree of life, signifying a sentient being. Man, as celestial and terrestrial, positive and negative, good and bad, beautiful and ugly, the cycle of life and death, hidden truths, and the middle pillar. The tree of knowledge and the tree of life further symbolize the duality of man's transformation. The tree of knowledge, as taught in ancient mystery schools, referred to the 7 liberal arts and sciences that is divided into 2 parts, the trivium and the quadrivium. The trivium's emphasis is the art of language, including history. Language is terrestrial and provides the basis of understanding. It has 3 components: grammar, rhetoric, and logic, also known as dialectic. The quadrivium addresses abstract thought necessary to understand celestial science and has 4 elements: mathematics, geometry, music, and astronomy. Knowledge comes to each of us from many places and in many ways. When we have a tongue that is silent, eyes that see, ears that listen, and a heart to recognize and appreciate it for what it is, when we are duly and truly prepared to receive it, knowledge comes. Remember that. The tree of life symbolizes man within the universe, a point within a circle, a microcosm within a macrocosm, the terrestrial within the celestial, a seed, an egg. The tree of life also symbolizes the transformative aspect of the Philosopher's stone. Its roots represent the red stone, our heart, and our circulatory system that are terrestrial, while its branches represent the white stone, our mind, and our nervous system, symbolizing our mind, our inner space of abstract thoughts, ideas, and concepts that are celestial. Its trunk symbolizes the connectivity of our spirit, embodies our soul, and binds our heart and mind as one with the universe. The tree of life employs 7 universal laws. There's mentalism, where the all is mind, the universe is mental. The all is part of everything, and everything is part of the all. There's correspondence, also known as the law of analogy. This law tells us, as above, so below, as below, so above, as within, so without, as without, so within. This means that there is harmony, agreement, and correspondence. Vibration. Nothing rests, everything moves. Everything vibrates. The whole universe is but a vibration. It underpins the law of attraction. And polarity. Everything is dual. Everything has poles. Everything has its pair of opposites. Opposites are identical in nature, but they only differ in degree. In rhythm, everything flows out and in. All things rise and fall. The pendulum swings manifest in everything. The measure of the swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. Rhythm compensates. Cause and effect. Every cause has its effect. Every effect has its cause. In gender, gender is in everything. Everything has its masculine and feminine principles. Like serpents on a caduceus, the 7 liberal arts and sciences and 7 universal laws present as an intertwined double helix, symbolizing both our DNA and our nervous system wrapped around our spine that's connected to our brain, wherein lies our third eye. The zigzag lightning flash found in the Kabbalistic tree of life is depicted here as a straight path as it travels from the ground up through our chakras to our brain. As with any electrical circuit, we must be properly grounded for our mind to be illuminated. The middle pillar is found by navigating between the masculine and feminine pillars, the terrestrial and the celestial. It's the attainment of equilibrium, peace, unity, and harmony of mind, body, and spirit. Meditation is a vehicle for spiritual transformation that can help us become balanced and enlightened. Through meditation and prayer, we're able to burn off our ego and divest ourselves of the superfluities of life. We're able to explore consciousness to see beyond ourselves, becoming better than we once were, connecting with and becoming one with the universe. What I've recently been able to validate is that the Philosopher's Stone is not what folks think it is at all. Generally, people think about the stone as an alchemical process of changing, transmuting lead into gold. Such an assumption is misguided. The idea of changing lead into gold wasn't possible in ancient times and didn't happen. Lead, as an element, has no impurities. To transmute lead into gold, therefore, literally requires altering the atomic structure of lead. Without a nuclear reactor, it's not possible. With a nuclear reactor, it can be done, but the cost of the process is grossly exorbitant. The amount of gold recovered is negligible, just a few atoms worth, and has a disproportionately negative return on its investment. What ancient alchemists were referring to when alluding to changing lead into gold is the process of refining galena. Galena is a raw lead ore that is primarily a source of silver and contains trace amounts of gold. More than a philosophical vehicle for spiritual transformation, creation of the Philosopher's Stone is a mythical alchemical process, a quest for the elixir of life and immortality that men have pursued for thousands of years. It's rumored that a few have found or created the stone, but most have failed. Perhaps the stone is the lapis lazuli, the fabled emerald green jewel that fell from Lucifer's crown during the war in heaven, some refer to as the Holy Grail. It's also possible that the stone was created and regularly used at some point by the ancients, but knowledge of its creation and use became lost, giving rise to an odyssey of recollection obfuscated by mystics and alchemists, further conflated by existential speculation. But here's the rub. If the stone doesn't exist, if it isn't real, if its seemingly magical powers are nothing more than fantasy, then why have the most intelligent and respected men throughout human history invested so much time and effort, risking everything in pursuit of its discovery and creation? Logic suggests that there must be some truth driving persistent myths about the stone. Could it be that what the stone represents has been conflated with metaphorical fantasy and a lack of understanding? Yes. Ancient alchemists were crafty. According to the eminent psychologist Dr. Carl Jung in Psychology and Alchemy, one of their mottos was obscurum per obscurus. Explain the obscure by the more obscure. Medieval alchemists obscured the process of creating the Philosopher's Stone, the making of pigments, medicines, and essential oils with cryptic illustrations and astrological writings that refer to the zodiac, planets, sun, moon, and metaphorical language. We find pursuit of the stone described using a variety of cryptic illustrations. Two examples are those of Augustinian friar Sir George Ripley in the nearly 30-foot-long 15th century Ripley scroll and Count Michael Meyer in Atalanta Fusions. Ripley describes his quest for the stone using allegorical bestiary illustrations of animals, birds, and colors as steps in the alchemical process. In contrast, Meyer's approach uses geometry. It's Meyer's illustration, Emblem 21 in Atalanta Fusions, that provides a key to understanding the stone's potential. Alchemy can be quite confusing as it's not a clearly defined process. Although there's a semblance of structure, it's quite fluid. The process, steps, allegory employed, etc. are contingent on individual alchemists, his intent, what is being done, and with what. Alchemy's nature is a personal, multidimensional journey of exploration of inner space. As such, the process is as varied as the individuals and paths they pursue. This fluidity and vagueness of alchemy confounds those not intimately familiar with it. For example, the Ripley scroll pertains to a branch of alchemy called spagyrics. In times past, alchemists were equated with physicians and scientists. Spagyrics is the plant-based alchemical preparation of medicinal essences, elixirs, tinctures, and essential oils using flowers, leaves, roots, bark of trees, or fungi. A client approaches an alchemist with an ailment. To determine and effect a possible cure, the alchemist also had to know the astronomy or the astrology. In other words, an alchemist had to know what constellations, stars, and planets were associated with which plants and substances given the day of the week and time of the year to address an ailment. The first step in this alchemical process is called deadheading. It's when the head of a flower or a plant is collected in the early morning while the dew is still on it. The Ripley scroll refers to spagyrics as an attempt to create the elixir of life aspect of the Philosopher's Stone. Spagyrics is referenced in the Bible as the elixir of life. When Salome demands the head of John the Baptist on a silver platter, it's referring to the beginning of a spagyric alchemical process, collection of a deadhead during a full moon, symbolized by the silver platter that initialized Jesus' spiritual transformation and resurrection. Another branch of alchemy involves the creation of pigments. Mercury, sulfur, salt, oils, lead, and a variety of other metals and minerals were used to make pigments. Paracelsus referred to mercury, sulfur, and salt as the three primes, the tria prima, used in accordance with the law of the triangle. The law of the triangle used ratios of mercury and sulfur in accordance with the Pythagorean theorem, also known as the 47th problem of Euclid. Alchemists would work with the three primes using a process called solva et coagula, which translates to meaning dissolving and coagulating. Breaking apart materials so they could recombine was considered a method of purification. In modern chemistry, a similar process is used to purify elements and compounds through crystallization. Matter is either melted or dissolved and then allowed to recombine to yield a product of higher purity than the source material. To protect their work, some medieval alchemists mixed arsenic and other poisons into their pigments and inks. An example of this is found in the book The Name of the Rose by Umberto Eco and the movie of the same name starring Sean Connery. Before reviewing Meyer's Emblem 21 from Atalanta Fusions, it may be helpful to look at an example of how symbology is used in alchemy and why it can be so perplexing. The stamping of Canon Latonier entitled The Sword, the Eight-Pointed Star, The Amazing Predictions by Paul-Marie Tonnier is an example of the spiritual transformation process using knights, kings, queens, the Pope, and religious symbols. It harkens back to and offers an alchemical depiction of the transformation process found in the M8 doctrine. Paul-Marie Tonnier was an ordained priest, canon of the church, historian, and archaeologist specializing in Romanesque sculpture who wrote a series of monographs on the churches of Saintonge in the southwest region of France. He was one of the dominant scholars of Saintonge, ordained a priest, then curate at Pons, then at Marans, before being appointed parish priest at Pelé and at Saint-André de Ladon. The great talent of Canon Tonnier lies in his way of mixing history and archaeological observation to understand a monument. Canon Latonier is attributed with identifying graffiti inside the tower grate at Dôme to the Templars. Dôme is where the Oak Island team discovered an image that they believe is similar to their leg cross. However, in 2018, the graffiti were restored and a new study of the engravings was commissioned. It confirmed that the thesis of Canon Tonnier wasn't possible and that the tower gate was possibly a place of waiting or even idleness. Though the graffiti at Dôme has a Christian and Templar flavor, there is nothing conclusive indicative of Templars being imprisoned there. What further blemishes Latonnier's theory is that he employed his fertile imagination and artistic license to embellish images inscribed upon Dôme's walls. His published stampings do not accurately reflect what is inscribed there. Then, too, he groups individual images together to relate what appears to be an alchemical story, something the Templars would not have done. Regardless of a Templar connection, the alchemical story is consistent with other comparable depictions of the process for creating the Philosopher's Stone. In looking at the illustration, the first impression is that its background appears to replicate several scenes etched in 4 levels of mortared stone block. The multitude of circular depictions may represent stone granulations, but they impress as deadheads. In actuality, the illustration depicts the alchemical process for creation of the Philosopher's Stone. What first appear to be stone blocks are a series of panels representing metaphorical steps in the creation process. In the uppermost panel, the imagery is vague and blurry. Detail isn't discernible. The initial impression is that it appears to be either a battle or apocalyptic. In the upper left, there is a mounted hooded figure, an executioner brandishing an executioner's sword. It's unclear if he's slaying people, demons, or what. Adjacent on the right and center is what appears to be a mounted knight. There is nothing remarkable about the knight to suggest that he is a Templar. The charge on the knight's escutcheon initially impresses as horizontal lines of dots. It's difficult to say what these dots are, but the impression is suggestive of the coat of arms and a connection with the House of Rochefort. This mounted knight has apparently slid into a pit of burning deadheads. Deadhead refers to caput mortem. The first step in an alchemical process is called calcination, the burning of the materia prima until it is ash or a useless residue after sublimation or distillation that is called the deadhead or caput mortem. The alchemical symbol for a deadhead is a circle containing 3 dots, reminiscent of a face as depicted in the drawing. The second panel from the top continues with the background of deadheads that also suggests smoke or fumes. Beginning on the left, there is a 9-spoked star in the lower left. Alchemically, a 9-spoked star is a symbol of perfection or purification. A crowned head is above and slightly to the right of the star. Continuing to the right is a 4-winged crowned cherub with something illegible written adjacent to the lower left wing, and a second crowned face at the top of its outermost wing on the right. The 2 crowned heads and the cherub symbolize the cherubim of glory shadowing the mercy seat on the lid of the Ark of the Covenant, referred to in Hebrews 9 verse 5. The crowns worn by the cherubim refers to the reduced or metallic mass obtained in the treatment of various ores, and alludes to what is called regulus and the alchemical process of transmuting lead into gold. What we see here is the calcination of galena, raw lead ore, that emits toxic mercury and lead sulfide fumes. The 2 crowned heads, as it's refined as pure lead, the cherub. Centered in the panel is a spoked wheel, a second 9-spoked star, and a crescent moon. To the left of the wheel is an illegible word that may be sun. A spoked wheel is a symbol for both the sun and gold. The number of spokes in the wheel suggests a gematria pattern of 2515. If that is the case, according to Strong's exhaustive concordance, 2515 represents the Hebrew word chalak, that means division or separation. Again, we have a second 9-spoked star that alchemically represents purification. To the right of the star is a crescent moon that appears to possibly have the word Luna inscribed to its left. A crescent moon in alchemy symbolizes silver. What this center portion of the panel is telling us is that pure gold and silver are separated from the caput mortuum and lead. This is the second stage of the alchemical process known as dissolution, where the ashes are dissolved in water to obtain a bullion of silver and gold. On the right side of the panel is a 2-winged cherub and an 8-spoked star. There appears to possibly be symbols and writing, but they're illegible. We can also see that the toxic fumes depicted on the panel's left side have been dissipated. What is referenced here is the third stage of the process that is known as separation. In this instance, the cherub represents the bullion containing silver and gold, and the 8-spoked star symbolizes adding a solution of sal ammoniac, also known as ammonium chloride, to create silver chloride. In the third panel, we find 2 more steps of the process that involves heating. On the left is a figure having a cross on his cap, an emblem upon his breast, holding a sword raised in the guard position in his left hand, suggestive of possibly a fighting bishop or a Knight Templar priest. To the left of the sword, what appears to be M-A-E is written in capital letters. M-A-E may be an abbreviation for Meva, meaning intoxicating. In other words, noxious fumes. This is the fourth stage of the process called conjunction, when the products of the first three stages are combined, heated, and purified. The next segment of the panel depicts a king, a priest, and a queen. The king is seated on a throne holding a scepter in his right hand that has a fleur-de-lis symbolizing the flower of life, as much as France, and is another alchemical symbol for silver as its tip. Again, the crown indicates a reduction of the metals known as regulus. Letters and symbols appear to be incorporated in his robe, but are not legible. There is a halo behind his head, symbolizing a full moon and pure silver. To the left of his scepter is a word that appears to be mana in capital letters. Mana refers to the power of the elemental forces of nature embodied in an object or person. To the right of the king is a priest performing the Eucharist. The wine in the priest's chalice symbolizes the alchemical stages of fermentation, putrefaction, and distillation. Note that incorporated at the base of the chalice held in the priest's right hand is a V. The V alludes to the Latin word vitae, meaning life. Grapes are fermented and distilled to create wine that contains alcohol. An alchemical term for alcohol is aqua vita, meaning water of life. In his left hand, the priest holds up a communion wafer represented as an encircled equilateral cross. In alchemy, this symbol often represents the element of earth. However, it can also represent verdigris, atmospheric oxidation, usually, but not always, in reference to copper. When ammonium chloride is added to the lead that has been separated from the galena and exposed to the air, the lead oxidizes as silver chloride and becomes coated with a chalky white powder. This oxidation contains silver and gold that must be reduced and refined through distillation to separate them. To the right of the priest, we have a queen holding a chalice in her right hand, symbolizing distillation. Behind the queen's head is a sun halo, signifying her receiving distilled gold. This aspect of creating the Philosopher's Stone is referred to as the alchemical marriage of the red king to the white queen, in accordance with the M8 doctrine. The bottom panel of the illustration has obscured text that appears to be in Latin. On the far right is an image of Jesus on the cross with large four-pointed crown above his head, symbolizing one's reward for completing the process of transmuting lead into gold. 2 points in this regard. First, it's not a process of actually changing lead into gold. Rather, the extraction of silver and gold from galena, which is lead ore. Second, it's an allegorical spiritual process of improvement and refinement, whereby we burn off our ego and distill our desire and the superfluities of life to become pure and better than we once were. The metaphorical spiritual transformation is further exemplified when we consider the earliest known depiction of the alchemical process to create the stone, found in the Chrysopoeia of Cleopatra. Cleopatra the alchemist was a Greek alchemist, philosopher, and author, credited as the inventor of the alembic. She is associated with the alchemical school typified by Camarius and Mary the Jewess that use complex apparatus for distillation and sublimation. Cleopatra the alchemist is also a possible contemporary of Zosimus of Panopolis and one of 4 women who could allegedly produce the Philosopher's Stone. The other 3 being Mary the Jewess, Tafnutia, and Medera. Her noted works include On Weights and Measures, Gold Making of Cleopatra, and a dialogue of the philosophers and Cleopatra. The Chrysopoeia of Cleopatra is a single-page document containing 4 drawings that was found in a 10th to 11th century manuscript in the Biblioteca Marciana in Venice, Italy. In the illustration, I've attempted to interpret the process depicted by Cleopatra's drawings. Some of the symbols she used are archaic and have previously been misinterpreted. Complicating matters is her incorporation of gematria regarding describing creation of silver chloride and the lack of procedural notes. What is clear, at least for pragmatic students of alchemy, is that pure lead was not used in the process. Pure lead has no impurities to remove. Instead, alchemists used galena. Galena is raw lead ore that is an important source of silver and contains trace amounts of gold that can be extracted. As such, the alchemical reference to transmuting lead into gold is a misnomer. Literal transmutation requires molecular alteration of a substance's atomic structure. So, the transmutation of lead into gold is a metaphor for the refinement of galena to obtain a few grains of gold as salt. It's a time-consuming, complicated, and potentially dangerous process requiring great attention to detail. Allegorically, alchemy is a spiritual process manifesting as a physical one to explore inner space. It's a quest for the Holy Grail, an ongoing process in which we burn off and distill the impurities of our mind, body, and spirit to find our essence, our salt. Along with other layered cryptic messages, the alchemical process for creation of the stone is found incorporated as a secret hidden within the ritual and lectures of Freemasonry. This should not be surprising, as the founders of modern Freemasonry were all alchemists. Men such as Dr. John Dee, Sir Francis Bacon, Count Michael Meyer, Robert Flood, Nicholas Flamel, Robert Boyle, Sir Isaac Newton, etc. In opening a Masonic lodge, the first thing that occurs in the lodge is that the lodge is purged of its impurities, cowards and eavesdroppers. In the degree rituals, candidates circumambulate 1, 2, 3 times. This is analogous to placing galena, raw lead ore, into a keratokis. A keratokis is a double boiler of water, or another solution containing a nested layer of sand or bone ash that contains another nested layer of your sublimate, used to indirectly heat and thereby reduce it. In this case, galena, by cooking off its impurities. When galena is reduced in this manner, poisonous vapors of lead sulfide and mercury are emitted, and the galena is reduced to pure lead, having an oxidized layer of silver and gold. In the first degree of Masonry, a candidate is received on a point of the compasses pressed against his chest, his heart and lungs, alchemically symbolizing the nested chambers of a keratokis, chambers where carbon dioxide is removed from our blood, purified with oxygen, and pumped throughout our body. In the opening scene of the movie Forrest Gump, Forrest is sitting on a bench next to a nurse. He offers her chocolates, then points at her shoes, saying, "My mama always said you can tell a lot about a person by their shoes, where they're going, where they've been." Forrest then proceeds to share his life story. Like shoes, we can use science and mathematics to glean an idea of where we've been and where we might be going. Familiarity with these ideas helps us fit the gazillion pieces of a giant jigsaw puzzle together so we can view and appreciate a composite big picture. The question is not about otherworldly visitation. That Earth has been and is being visited is a given. Rather, where are these visitors from and how did they travel here? Have you ever puzzled over the questions of time and space? The speed of thought? What is time? What is space? What is the speed of thought? These appear to be simple, straightforward questions, but they're seemingly abstract intangibles that are difficult to answer. Yet, attempting to answer these questions are crucial to comprehending our sense of being, affording us a sense of reality, whether it's material or spiritual, defining our place and purpose within what we perceive as our construct of the universe, man within the cosmos, us as a microcosm within the macrocosm of the universe. The unified field is a term coined by Albert Einstein, who attempted to unify his general theory of relativity with electromagnetism. The theory of everything and grand unified theory are closely related to unified field theory, but differ by not requiring the basis of nature to be fields, and often by attempting to explain physical constants of nature. Unification theory must satisfy the following: include general relativity, include the quantum theory, and unite general relativity with quantum theory. We'll take a look at flux particle theory, string theory, and the Tesla equation. Unified field theory uses general relativity and Tesla equations to describe the Philosopher's Stone. The equation for general relativity is E equals mc squared. The Tesla equation is TL equals mc squared. Therefore, E equals TL equals mc squared speaks to the first cause argument. An interpretation of the Philosopher's Stone symbol is that it represents the spiritual transformation of man within the universe and his ascent from the terrestrial world to the celestial. It suggests a travel, possibly interdimensional, in the space-time continuum using a stargate and provides a means of panspermia. In addition to spiritual transformation, the Philosopher's Stone is alleged to involve immortality. Immortality is a reference to time. Generally, we consider time as linear, a line having a beginning and an end, alpha and omega, 1 and 0 in binary. Symbolically, time is represented as an hourglass in which sands of the past narrow in focus, condense, and come together to move beyond a choke point as moments in the present before falling into the abyss of an unforeseeable future, one grain, one moment, one frame of a movie at a time. The idea is also captured as an asterisk and as the letter and Roman numeral X, symbolizing the number 10 and to indicate multiplication or times. Considering these symbols from an occult perspective, we might ascertain that time embraces universal principles, mentalism, that the universe is a manifestation of inner space as our mind, vibration, that physical matter and spiritual energy vibrate, polarity and gender, whereby everything is dual. Everything has poles. Everything has its pair of opposites that are identical in nature but different in degree. And that everything has its masculine and feminine principles. Rhythm between opposing poles of male and female, positive and negative. Everything flows out and in. Everything has its tides. All things rise and fall. Correspondence between the laws and phenomena of the various planes of being and life, and cause and effect that suggest everything that exists has something that caused it. There is nothing in our world that came from nothing. It would seem that time is universal. But is it? Most of us think of time in terms of the 4 seasons: years, months, weeks, days, hours, minutes, seconds. Our paradigm of time is not universal. It's a man-made construct predicated upon the relationship of Earth to its sun. We can't even use such a model for time on Mars, Venus, or any other planet, as the rotation, orbit, distance from the sun, and the amount of and duration of light used to measure time as we perceive it on Earth is not the same. Neither is our idea of time applicable in distant galaxies or anywhere else in the universe for that matter. So, what is time, really? Is it linear and consecutive? Or is time a concurrent, simultaneous dimensional point of what we perceive as the past, present, and future, happening all at once within the 3 dimensions of space? Can time be bent or folded, enabling movement between what we perceive as past, present, and future? There's a reference to this in Steven Spielberg's TV series Taken. Alle ihre Erinnerungen kommen auf einmal. Alle ihre Erinnerungen und alle ihre Ängste. All your memories play at once. All your memories and all your fears. These are questions man has been curious about since, well, time immemorial. In actuality, time is motion with memory. It describes change in the motions of objects relative to one another until equilibrium is achieved in accordance with the law of entropy. Time is affected by gravity or inertia because gravitational pressure affects motion. Space is a boundless, 3-dimensional extent in which objects and events occur and have relative position and direction. A continuum is a continuous sequence in which adjacent elements are not perceptibly different from each other. Going forward, we're going to consider some ideas and concepts about time and what makes it tick. Published in 1895, H.G. Wells pondered the questions of time and space in his book, The Time Machine. If you haven't read it or seen the movie, it's a thrilling science fiction novel about a man known only as the Time Traveler who experiences adventures traveling back and forward in time. Adventures aside, Wells attempts to address the space-time continuum and makes some very valid points. Any real body must have extension in 4 directions. It must have length, breadth, thickness, and duration. A mathematical line, a line of thickness nil, has no real existence. Neither has a mathematical plane. These things are mere abstractions. Nor, having only length, breadth, and thickness, can a cube have real existence. Can an instantaneous cube exist? Can a cube that does not last for any time at all have real existence? There are really 4 dimensions, 3 which we call the planes of space, and a 4th, time. There is, however, a tendency to draw an unreal distinction between the former 3 dimensions and the latter, because it happens that our consciousness moves intermittently in one direction along the latter from the beginning to the end of our lives. Really, this is what is meant by the 4th dimension, though some people who talk about the 4th dimension do not know they mean it. It's only another way of looking at time. There is no difference between time and any of the 3 dimensions of space except that our consciousness moves along it. But some foolish people have got hold of the wrong side of that idea. Space, as our mathematicians have it, is spoken of as having 3 dimensions, which one may call length, breadth, and thickness, and is always definable by reference to 3 planes, each at right angles to the others. Some philosophical people have asked why 3 dimensions particularly, why not another direction at right angles to the other 3, and have even tried to construct a 4-dimensional geometry. On a flat surface which has only 2 dimensions, we can represent a figure of a 3-dimensional solid, and similarly, they think that by models of 3 dimensions, they could represent one of 4, if they could master the perspective of the thing. Time is only a kind of space. If time is really only a 4th dimension of space, why is it, and why has it always been, regarded as something different? And why can't we move in time as we move about in the other dimensions of space? We can only move freely in 2 dimensions, going forward, backward, or side to side, but gravity limits us in going up and down. Our mental existences have no dimensions, are immaterial, and travel along the time dimension with a uniform velocity. We can move about in all directions of space, but we cannot move about in time. We can vividly recall an event, mentally jumping back in time for a moment, or mentally project forward in time to visualize an event that may or may not happen, but have no means of remaining there for any length of time, or physically altering the outcome within our plane of existence. One of the more interesting points Wells makes is that altering the 4th dimension of time alters our perception. For example, let's place an object on a table and send it forward in time to some distant point, say 50 years in the future. Though the object is no longer visible to us in our present time and may seem to disappear, in reality, it has not physically moved and remains within the 3-dimensional planes of its existence. It only seems to disappear because the dimension of time has changed, and it will not be perceptible to us and materialize again for 50 years hence. How can we account for time as a dimension? How is it regulated? If we think about it, time may be comparable to sound, light, smell, taste, and touch, our 5 senses, as an order of vibration. Sound, light, touch, smell, and taste are vibrational wavelengths. We can only hear, see, touch, smell, and taste within a narrow band of frequency ranges. Just because we aren't able to naturally discern their existence beyond the limited frequency range enabled by our senses doesn't mean they don't exist, as other animals and organisms easily detect them. Is it possible that our perception of time is really an order of vibration comparable to our five senses? If the dimension of time employs an order of vibration, is time a sixth sense? Is physical or astral time travel therefore possible? Yes. We'll get to that in a moment. With these things in mind, we ponder the universal cycle of nature, existence, death, and regeneration. What is the purpose and function of this cycle in the broader, larger scheme of the universe from a macrocosmic perspective? There must be something to it, right? Then too, why do we say history repeats itself? Clarence Darrow said, history repeats itself, and that's one of the things wrong with history. Adam Curtis said, sometimes history repeats itself, and sometimes it doesn't. Quavo said, history repeats itself, so you might want to pay attention. And George Santayana is credited with declaring, those who do not remember the past are condemned to repeat it. At its core, the cycle of nature, the apparent cycle of history, for that matter, is predicated on time. If time is cyclical, it's essentially a clock that has a mathematical basis. We'll discuss that in a moment too, but first we have another question to mull over. What is the speed of thought? It appears thought as a form of energy may also be an order of vibration, but one which may require a vehicle to manifest as a physical sense of being, an astral hologram. Can thought travel or project in time? Are thoughts directional? If thoughts are vibrational elements requiring a vehicle to manifest, are our dreams and visions an alternate manifestation of our being as a pseudo-presence? In other words, can they exist in another time dimension? Are we able to physically interact and affect outcomes in those worlds, or are we phantom spectators whose presence may be at best suspected? In the alchemical search for the unified field, I pose the question about the speed of thought. If the speed of light is 186,282 miles per second in a vacuum, what then is the speed of thought? Speed is measured as time over distance, but does distance apply to thought? If distance as a variable is not applicable to thought, then our formula for calculating its speed won't work. Perhaps thought is pure energy, and its speed is calculated as the speed of light squared, multiplied by its mass. But does thought have mass? It's been suggested that the universe is a thought-generated hologram, and that all energies are harmonic manifestations of it. If the universe were indeed a thought-generated hologram, and all energies if all energies were harmonic manifestations of it, is it to suggest past, present, and future thoughts are concurrent, existing simultaneously? Past, present, and future are elements of time, a man-made construct. So, how and why are these elements of time differentiated in a hologram? Is time parsed as a sequential part of a process, reconciled as harmonic vibratory manifestations akin to the visible light spectrum? Can we use time as a variable to calculate the speed of thought? Is the speed of thought constrained by distance and time? Or Is the speed of thought instantaneous, or at least beyond our present ability to measure it? When is thought formed, conceived? Are thoughts conceived in a vacuum, or are they conceived in conjunction with, and are they influenced by other thoughts or knowledge? Is inception or conception of thought identifiable, measurable, quantifiable? Is thought an emanation of light, photons? Does an increase in photon emissions equate to enlightenment? Time travel is not the same as teleportation, moving a physical object in space from one location to another. Teleportation requires molecular disassembly and then correct reassembly of an object. Does molecular degradation of an object occur with time travel? If so, at what rate and what causes it? What happens if a contaminant, a piece of dust or a fly, enters into the process? In the alchemical search for the unified field, the philosophy and operative mechanics of the Philosopher's Stone were discussed at length as a means of enlightenment. What we will do here is analyze the construct of the stone to see if it could be used as a possible vehicle for time travel within the space-time continuum, as H.G. Wells theorized in The Time Machine. One of the things we'll consider is the use of vibration and pressure within a geometric form and how it might work. We tend to view time as linear, as past, present, and future. An example of linear time is an hourglass. When we measure time using an hourglass, the sand in the upper chamber of it represents the past. In a controlled manner, gravity causes sand to flow past a narrow choke point, the present, into the bottom chamber, representing the future. When the upper chamber no longer contains sand and is empty, the cycle of measured time is complete. In a sense, we could say that when we begin measuring time, that it's the moment when a divine spark occurs at conception and life begins. That the grains of sand represent moments of life in the present, flowing into an unknown future until no sand, no life remains, and we're dead. Is that how the cycle of nature measures time? No. The cycle of nature is one of conception, existence, death, and regeneration. In nature, life, energy, does not die or cease to exist. Life is energy. As such, according to thermodynamics and the law of conservation, energy, therefore life, can neither be created or destroyed. It regenerates. Our hourglass is simply flipped over and repeatedly reset. The takeaway is that we never truly die. Our life form as we know it, our energy, may be repurposed, but we continue to exist, albeit in a different form. Therefore, life, energy, is everlasting. What we will do is analyze the construct of the stone to see if it can be used as a vehicle for travel within the space-time continuum, as H.G. Wells theorized. One of the things we'll consider is the use of vibration and pressure within a geometric form and how it might work. Nikola Tesla said, "There is no energy in matter other than that received from the environment." Tesla experimented with time travel. Allegedly, he was obsessed with time travel, worked on a time machine, and reportedly succeeded, saying, "I could see the past, the present, and future all at the same time." According to an article in Newspunch in March of 1895, Tesla made a shocking discovery that he shared with a reporter for the New York Herald, suggesting that time and space could be influenced by magnetic fields. His experiments in high voltage electricity, along with magnetic fields, led him to discover that time and space may be deformed to essentially create a door that may lead to another time. This led to experiments in time travel by the U.S. military and the debacle of the USS Eldridge in the Philadelphia experiment in 1943. That Tesla suggests time and space can be influenced by magnetic fields, and that he experimented with high voltage electricity along with magnetic fields, incorporates the principles of polarity and genders applied to the use of the Philosopher's Stone as a time-traveling vehicle. A magnet is an object that produces its own magnetic field that interacts with other magnetic fields. It has a north pole and a south pole. Field lines begin at the North Pole and radiate to the South Pole. When we have two magnets, polar opposites, north and south, attract each other, seeking a union. This is because the direction of the field lines goes toward each other. In contrast, like poles, north and north or south and south, repel each other because the direction of the field lines is away from each other. Electromagnetics is a little more complicated than simple magnetics. Referring to a master thesis in industrial electronics by Johansen and Lundgren titled EMC of Telecommunication Lines, we find the following succinct description. Electromagnetic fields are caused by electric charges at rest and in motion. Positive and negative electric charges are sources of the electric fields, and moving electric charges yielding a current is the source of magnetic fields. Time-varying electric and magnetic fields are coupled in an electromagnetic field radiating from its source. Electromagnetic fields are divided into 4 different categories. The magnetic flux density B with the unit T for Tesla or volt second per square meter. The magnetic field intensity H with the unit A over M, or amperes per meter. The electric field intensity E with the unit of volts per meter, and the electric flux density of D with the coulomb per square meter. A time varying E and D will give rise to B and H, and vice versa, where the relation depends on the properties of the medium. Far enough from the source, the magnetic field, H, will be perpendicular to the electric field, E, and both are normal to the direction of propagation. Far enough from the source, the wavefront, which will become almost spherical, can be seen as an almost plane front if the sphere is large enough. Then we have a uniform plane wave, where the ratio between the electric field and the magnetic field, called wave impedance. According to Albert Einstein, time is an illusion, an arbitrary construct. Both the future and the past are interchangeable and will play out exactly the way they were meant to. So, is the idea that we're moving forward in time in a linear fashion just an illusion? Is time travel possible? In his Special Theory of Relativity, published in 1905, Einstein determined that time is relative. Special relativity explains how speed affects mass, time, and space. Einstein's equation, E equals mc squared, translates to energy is equal to mass times the speed of light squared, where energy and mass are interchangeable. What this means is that an object approaches the speed of light, its mass becomes infinite, and so does the energy required to move it. Matter cannot go faster than light travels. In fact, matter and energy are just forms of the same thing. In other words, the rate at which time passes depends on your frame of reference. Time is not absolute. The rate at which time flows depends upon where you are and how fast you are traveling. Time dilates when an object traveling at high velocity experiences time at a slower rate than an object at rest. Einstein's theory of general relativity states that gravity can bend time, bringing gravitational time dilation into play. The logic behind gravitational time dilation is simple. Objects with a lot of mass create a strong gravitational field. The gravitational field wraps the fabric of space-time around these objects, producing what we know as gravity. When coupled with block universe theory, also known as eternalism, time travel becomes theoretically possible. The past, present, and future all coexist now. All moments that exist are relative to each other within 3 spatial dimensions and a single time dimension. Without delving into quantum and string theories, among other things. These ideas bring gravitational time dilation into play. According to interesting engineering, the logic behind gravitational time dilation is fairly simple. Objects with a lot of mass create a strong gravitational field. This gravitational field noticeably warps the fabric of space-time around these objects, producing what we know as gravity. When coupled with block universe theory, also known as eternalism, time travel becomes theoretically possible. If we are traveling at or near the speed of light using an Einstein-Rosen bridge, wormholes, as a shortcut to another location in space-time. In a separate article in Interesting Engineering, Dr. Christy Miller describes how the past, present, and future all coexist now. She posits that our universe might be a giant four-dimensional block of space-time, containing all the things that ever happened and will happen in our traditional perception of time. That all moments that exist are relative to each other within three spatial dimensions and a single time dimension. On July 10, 1937, at a reception honoring his 81st birthday in the Grand Ballroom at the Hotel New Yorker in New York City, Nikola Tesla was feted and received the Order of the White Lion from Czechoslovakia and the Order of the White Eagle from Yugoslavia. As part of the celebration, Tesla offered a prepared statement that included, in part, "My second discovery was a physical truth of the greatest importance. As I have searched the scientific records in more than half a dozen languages for a long time without finding the least anticipation, I consider myself the original discoverer of this truth, which can be expressed by this statement. There is no energy in matter other than that received from the environment." On my 79th birthday, I made a brief reference to it, but its meaning and significance have become clearer to me since then. It applies rigorously to molecules and atoms, as well as the largest heavenly bodies, and to all matter in the universe in any phase of its existence, and from its very formation to its ultimate disintegration. This is the source of Tesla's quote: "There is no energy in matter other than that received from the environment." It's a rather profound statement that may appear to conflict with Einstein's theory by approaching the relativity of time from a different direction. Over the years, it's evolved as part of a quest for the theory of everything, the holy grail of physics known as the Grand Unified Theory, a single mathematical framework capable of describing the entirety of the known universe. The Tesla equation is expressed as T equals mc squared, where tension, or T, multiplied by the length, or L, of the wave vibration creates mass, or m, multiplied by the speed of light, c, squared, in which both sides of the equation equate to energy, or E. Hold that thought for a moment. by delving into how the Philosopher's Stone might be a time machine, a rudimentary understanding of physics and some of the other theories are helpful. The four fundamental forces of nature are gravity, electromagnetic force, the weak nuclear force, and the strong nuclear force. In an article by space.com, gravity is the attraction between two objects that have mass. Sir Isaac Newton described gravity as a literal attraction between two objects. Einstein's theory of relativity suggests that gravity is neither an attraction nor a force. Instead, it's a consequence of objects bending space-time. The weak nuclear interaction is responsible for particle decay, literally changing one type of subatomic particle into another. The electromagnetic force, also called the Lorentz force, acts between charged particles, like negatively charged electrons and positively charged protons. Opposite charges attract one another, while like charges repel. The greater the charge, the greater the force. And, much like gravity, this force can be felt from an infinite distance, albeit the force would be very, very small at that distance. As its name indicates, the electromagnetic force consists of two parts, the electric force and the magnetic force. At first, physicists described these forces as separate from one another, but researchers later realized that the two are components of the same force. The electric component acts between charged particles, whether they're moving or stationary, creating a field by which the charges can influence each other. But once set into motion, those charged particles begin to display the second component, the magnetic force. The particles create a magnetic field around them as they move. The strong force is the strongest of the four fundamental forces of nature, binding the fundamental particles of matter together to form larger particles. The outstanding question of the four fundamental forces is whether they're actually manifestations of just a single great force of the universe. If so, each of them should be able to merge with the others. It also begs the question of if there's a fifth force beyond the four forces we know of. Referring to an article in New Scientist, physicists presently rely on two frameworks to describe the universe: quantum theory, that accurately describes the physics of the very small, and the theory of general relativity, that describes the physics of the enormously large. The problem is that the two theories are incompatible because of gravity and need reconciliation. Enter string theory. String theory claims to make that dream a reality. In simple terms, it does this by reimagining what reality is made of. Instead of treating subatomic particles as the fundamental building blocks of matter, string theory says that everything is made of unbelievably tiny strings, whose vibrations produce effects that we interpret as atoms, electrons, and quarks. In order for that to work, string theory has to make one more radical assumption: that instead of living in a universe with 3 dimensions of space and 1 of time, we live in one with either 9, 10, or 25 dimensions of space. These extra dimensions are then curled up so tightly that we don't notice them, much like a silken thread appears one-dimensional until you get close enough to notice its width. The flaw of string theory is that each compactification produces a different space-time and can predict a multiverse with innumerable different universes. So it appears string theory is inadequate. Scientists suspect that there's a fifth element, a fifth force of nature, to explain anomalous observations that don't fit existing theories. Niels Bohr said, "If quantum mechanics hasn't profoundly shocked you, you haven't understood it yet." Everything we call real is made of things that cannot be regarded as real. According to Power of Positivity, physicists have proven that nothing is solid. Nothing is solid and everything is energy. All that is really there is some spinning energy and empty space. That's it. And that spinning energy and empty space is all that everything solid is made up of. Recently, what has been labeled as the God particle, the Higgs boson particle, has been discovered that fills the empty space between atomic particles. The God particle gives atomic particles mass because it creates resistance as other particles push against it. Enter flux theory. In a paper titled Flux Particle Theory and Why the Speed of Light is c, Seamus McKelt says, "Flux particle theory is a complete theory of everything, including gravity, the four forces of nature, and a completely new way to understand the way dimensionality actually works. It's based solely on irrefutable logic. It uses strings, but not the string theory type, and everything is easily explained." In a separate paper, McKelt addresses quantum thread theory. There is a high-tension string particle field in space, not the string theory type. Everything is connected by the particle field, and it moves along with larger mass in proximity, something like what gravitational fields would be doing. A good 2D model would be something like a spider's web. Individual string lengths are approximately 1 angstrom. Now, imagine an infinite 3D spider's web. If a vibration was set off in it, it would travel forever, and the speed the vibrations travel through the net is the speed of light. That's actually what light is, a vibration traveling through a string particle field. The speed vibrations travel through the particle field is the speed of light, c. The particle field strings have a certain amount of tension, length, and mass that makes c the speed it is. If the tension, length, or mass changed, so would c. The Tesla equation is part of a quest for the theory of everything known as the Grand Unified Theory, a single mathematical framework capable of describing the entirety of the known universe. The Tesla equation is expressed as TL equals mc squared, where tension, or T, multiplied by the length of the wave, L, of vibration, creates mass, m, multiplied by the speed of light, c, squared, in which both sides of the equation equate to energy. This is why the speed of light is involved in Einstein's mass-energy equivalence equation, E equals mc squared, and why light travels at the speed of light. Back to the future. Traveling forward in time is relatively easy. Traveling backward in time is much harder, but Einstein's theory of general relativity seems to allow for it, using black holes, white holes, and wormholes, also known as Einstein-Rosen bridge. Backward time travel does not and cannot change the past because it violates the law of causality, cause and effect, that states that an effect cannot happen before its cause happens. This is called the grandfather paradox. An issue with time travel is one of causality. What this means is that time travel may not be possible for two reasons. One, regardless of whether time is linear or concurrent, any interaction or alteration of events or actions affects future outcomes. Two, objects from different times cannot simultaneously exist and occupy the same dimensions of space and time. What this means is that we're limited to observation and cannot interact outside our plane of existence. Our shadowy presence as spectators, even if unseen and not sensed by life forms, leads to the acquisition of knowledge that skews decisions and actions once we return to our plane and time of origin. We cannot occupy the same plane of existence to observe ourselves, our ancestors, or our descendants, as doing so jeopardizes our and their existence in accordance with the grandfather paradox. The multiverse is the hypothetical set of all universes. Together, these universes are presumed to comprise everything that exists, the entirety of space, time, matter, energy, information, and the physical laws and constants that describe them. The different universes within the multiverse are called parallel universes or alternate universes. One common assumption is that the multiverse is a patchwork quilt of separate universes, all bound by the same laws of physics. Parallel universes can exist individually or grouped together as the multiverse, offering the possibility of different existence realities and travel between them. The laws of nature may be radically different between parallel universes, providing multiple versions in which we could exist or not exist at all. Light speed limitations may not exist in a parallel universe, and the paradoxes we experience may be null and void when we jump into a different historical timeline. There are several multiverse debates. For example, the anthropic principle suggests that the existence of a multitude of universes, each with different physical laws, could explain the fine-tuning of our own universe for conscious life. Debates around Occam's razor and the simplicity of the universe versus a single universe arise. the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics and modal realism, the belief that all possible worlds exist and are as real as our world, are also subject to debate. The ideas explore various dimensions of space, physical laws, and mathematical structures to explain the existence and interactions of multiple universes. Some other multiverse concepts include twin world models, cyclic theories, M theory, and black hole cosmology. Max Tegmark and Brian Greene have proposed different classification schemes for multiverses and universes. Tegmark proposes 4 levels of classification: an extension of our universe, universes with different physical constants, many worlds interpretation of quantum physics, ultimate ensemble. While Greene envisions 9 types of multiverses: quilted, inflationary, brane, cyclic, landscape, quantum, holographic, simulated, and ultimate. Moving forward, let's look at the construct of the Philosopher's Stone to see how it might function as a time machine by reviewing Meyer's depiction of it using geometry found in Emblem 21 of the Atalanta fusions. Count Michael Meyer was an early 17th century alchemist and Rosicrucian colleague of Dr. John Dee and Sir Francis Bacon. In 1617, he published an alchemical text on the Philosopher's Stone, titled Atalanta Fusions, meaning Atalanta of fleeing. Of particular interest is an illustration called Emblem 21 that depicts the Philosopher's Stone using sacred geometry. What Emblem 21 suggests is that Meyer knew about block universe theory, the Tesla equation, and that he may have been a time traveler. Objects used in medieval alchemy illustrations were symbolic, used to convey cryptic messages. Each object depicted is significant, and attention must be given to even the smallest detail. In Emblem 21, it is apparent Meyer is referring to the Philosopher's Stone as a means for travel in space and time. There is no reasonable explanation for how he acquired his information, other than he himself was a space-time traveler, as he addresses concepts we are only now beginning to work with, such as block universe theory and one-inch theory. What is curious is his illustration incorporates references to OAO. A represents alpha, a beginning. O represents omega, an ending. Generally, we find alpha and omega referring to the beginning and end of a process or segment of linear time, alpha and omega. In using OAO, Meyer appears to suggest that time and space are not linear. If he were suggesting they were a repetitive cycle or process, he would have used AOA, meaning beginning and beginning, not OAO. As such, the implication is that moments in time and space are concurrent in accordance with block universe theory. Note that the compasses the traveler is using measures the distance from the beginning of the universe or time to the present. This is indicated by the shadow extending from the upper point of the compasses on the outer circle, the universe down to the disconnected A signifying beginning. The lower point of the compasses indicates he's measuring relative time and distance from creation of the universe to the creation of Earth, with the shadow extending to the woman, indicating creation of man on Earth. What is intriguing is that the shadow points to the woman and not the man. Is Meyer implying that the male figure symbolizes God, or that the male evolves somewhere else within the space-time continuum? We find in Meyer's illustration that a pyramid figures prominently within a circle, indicating Alpha and Omega, an end-to-end process. Within the pyramid is a squared circle containing a naked man and a naked woman. This represents a union of opposite genders, whereby a male is traditionally symbolized as an upward-facing triangle and a female is symbolized as a downward-facing triangle. Their union becomes a two-dimensional hexagram, also known as a Star of David, encircled as the Seal of Solomon. In three-dimensional form, it becomes a star tetrahedron or stellated octahedron. Note the geometric forms Meyer has on a sketch pad in the bottom left of the illustration. Include a hexagram as described, a square, and what appears to be a circle, but is the outline of a dodecahedron. Immediately to the right of the sketch pad is what appears to be a T-square, such as a draftsman or illustrator might use. However, the vertical bar extends beyond the horizontal bar and is not an accurate representation of the instrument, as is in the form of a lowercase t and not practical to use. Allegorically, the T-square is referring to time. To the right of the T-square is a fan-like object that could be a protractor, an instrument used to measure and draw angles. In this instance, due to its fan-like appearance, it's likely a clinometer, an instrument used for measuring angles of slope, elevation, or depression of an object with respect to gravity's direction. In other words, space. What Meyer is telling us is that geometry is the foundation of time and space. The sash and reverse stole that the man wears suggest ascending ladders, that he's about to take a step across the T-square, preparing to travel in time. Simultaneously, the man is holding a large pair of dividers. Generally, dividers or compasses are an instrument used to inscribe arcs or circles and measure distance between points. While the medieval man may be inscribing a circle on the block wall, he's also measuring the distance, the space between the center of the circle and its perimeter. What if the bricks in the wall represent moments of time in a block, space? Is it possible that Meyer's illustration of the Philosopher's Stone from 1617 addresses the space-time continuum, only recently postulated as block universe theory? Converting Meyer's Emblem 21 to a 2D model, we find a point within a circle represents man within the universe. A hexagram symbolizes transformation. The square alludes to the material, physical, terrestrial world. The combination of a hexagram within a squared circle gives the impression that transformation is occurring within a whole that's a doorway, a stargate similar to what we found in the Mesopotamian star map. A point-up triangle stands for an ascent to heaven. A circle represents the heavens themselves, the universe. An interpretation of the Philosopher's Stone symbol is that it represents the transformation of man within the universe and his ascent from the terrestrial world to the celestial. It suggests travel, possibly interdimensional, in the space-time continuum using a stargate. If we convert Meyer's 2D illustration to a 3D geometric model, it looks like this. Deconstructing the 3D model, we find that the stone is composed of platonic solids. Pythagoras described the 5 platonic solids as a tetrahedron, cube, octahedron, dodecahedron, and an icosahedron that are the basis of crystal forms. The vibrational motion of an atom in a crystal propagates to neighboring atoms, which leads to wave-like propagation of the vibrations throughout the crystal. The way in which these natural vibrations travel through the crystalline structure determine fundamental properties of the material. For example, these vibrations determine how well heat and electrons can traverse the material and how the material interacts with light. Swapping out a fraction of the material's atoms with atoms of a different element called doping, the speed and frequencies of these vibrations can be controlled. The first item of note is that the crystalline structure of minerals is that of platonic solids. As such, minerals vibrate and change their properties contingent upon temperature and pressure. Lead, gold, salt, etc. have a face-centered cubic form. Analyzing Meyer's model, we not only find platonic forms, we also discover that they are layered, interconnected, and have meaning. The 2 impaled tetrahedra are called a star tetrahedron that represents a Merkaba in mystic circles. The 3-dimensional components of the Philosopher's Stone are a star tetrahedron within what appears to be a sphere, but is actually a spheric rhombic dodecahedron that creates a faceted cube within a square pyramid within a geodesic icosahedron, also known as the flower of life. In its essence, the Philosopher's Stone is a tetrahedron, a square pyramid, that morphs through vibration and pressure or tension to appear as other platonic solids. To quote Rices, the stone is a triangle in its essence, a quadrangle in its quality. The core component of the Philosopher's Stone is a star tetrahedron, 2 impaled square pyramidal halves of a stellated octahedron. According to an internet article on crystal links, in mystic circles, this geometric form is known as a Merkaba. The Merkaba is the divine light vehicle allegedly used by ascended masters to connect with and reach those in tune with higher realms. Mer means light, Ka means spirit, Ba means body. Merkaba means the spirit or body surrounded by counter-rotating fields of light, wheels within wheels, spirals of energy, as in DNA, which transports the spirit or body from one dimension to another. The word Merkaba or Merkava, Hebrew for chariot or to ride an animal in a chariot, is used in the Bible in Ezekiel 1 verses 4 to 26 to refer to the throne chariot of God, the four-wheeled vehicle driven by four cherubim, each of which has four wings and four faces, a man, a lion, an ox, and an eagle. Merkaba mysticism, or chariot mysticism, is a school of early Jewish mysticism from about 1000 BC to 100 BC, centered on visions such as those found in the book of Ezekiel chapter 1, or in the Hekhelot, or palaces, literature concerning stories of ascents to the heavenly palaces and the throne of God. The main corpus of Merkaba literature was composed in Israel in the period of 200 to 700 AD, although later references to the chariot tradition can also be found in the literature. And a major text in this tradition is the Masa Merkaba, or the Works of the Chariot. In ancient alien theory, the chariot is a UFO. In modern esoteric teachings, it's taught that the Merkaba is an interdimensional vehicle consisting of two equally sized, interlocked tetrahedra of light with a common center where one tetrahedron points up and the other down. This point symmetric form is called a stella octangula or stellatid octahedron, which can also be obtained by extending the faces of a regular octahedron until they intersect again. In his books, researcher and physicist Drunvalo Melchizedek describes this figure as a star tetrahedron, since it can be viewed as a three-dimensional Star of David. By imaging two superimposed star tetrahedrons as counter-rotating, along with specific prana breathing techniques, certain eye movements, and mudras, it is taught that one can activate a non-visible saucer-shaped energy field around the human body that is anchored at the base of the spine. Once activated, this saucer-shaped field is capable of carrying one's consciousness directly to higher dimensions. Going forward, it's essential to understand what the time-space continuum is. Time is motion with memory. It describes change in the motions of objects relative to one another until equilibrium is achieved in accordance with the law of entropy. Time is affected by gravity or inertia because gravitational pressure affects motion. Space is a boundless, three-dimensional extent in which objects and events occur and have relative position and direction. A continuum is a continuous sequence in which adjacent elements are not perceptibly different from each other. It's at this point that Freemasonry teaches us that the form of a lodge should always be an oblong square, in length between the east and the west, in breadth between the north and the south, in height from heaven to the earth, and in depth from the surface to the center comes into play. An oblong square is a vague, ill-defined term. It appears that an oblong square may be defined in three ways: as two conjoined squares having a 2-to-1 ratio of length to width, as a square rotated 45 degrees to form a diamond or a lozenge in 2 dimensions, or as an octahedron in 3 dimensions, or as a racetrack. Note that when the oblong square is quartered, a concept derived from an element of Freemasonry referring to the 4th part of a circle whose allegorical meaning is undefined, we again find a squared circle inscribed with a hexagram within its interior, as in this 2-dimensional model of the stone. What this suggests is that as a capsule, an oblong square is capable of withstanding the rigors of space. Travel in the space-time continuum can be achieved by applying Newton's laws of motion. 1. Objects in motion stay in motion. 2. Force is a mass times acceleration. 3. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. Faraday's law tells us that a moving magnetic field can create an electric field, and that a moving electric field can create a magnetic field, uniting electromagnetism as a single force in an oscillating wave. According to James Clerk Maxwell's equations, the velocity of the electromagnetic wave is the velocity of light. Light is an electromagnetic wave. As the 2 tetrahedra of the Merkaba counter-rotate, a vibratory frequency is created. The electromagnetic force creates a collision of matter and antimatter, converting matter into energy using E equals mc squared. An outward pressure surrounds the Merkaba as a spherical rhombic dodecahedron, a warp bubble, within the faceted cube of the block universe of 3-dimensional space and the dimension of time. The square pyramid represents the vehicle of Ramana, which are mythological flying palaces or chariots described in Hindu texts and Sanskrit epics, and the geodesic icosahedron symbolizes life. The warp bubble enables travel faster than the speed of light and nullifies the effects of mass and gravity. Furthermore, the warp bubble enables the vehicle to transit any environment without resistance or restriction, relatively noiselessly, aside perhaps from a faint hum, as the frequency emitted is beyond our range of hearing. What happens is that the vehicle appears to morph as the varying platonic solids it's composed of. However, this is an illusion. When observed, it may be perceived as a bright light, as a twinkling or a rotating orb, or a star of various colors, a cube, a delta, a cigar shape, or as a tic-tac. What we refer to as a UFO or unidentified aerial phenomenon, a UAP, contingent on speed, vibrational frequency, atmospheric conditions, and the angle of view. It appears that Dr. John Dee and Sir Francis Bacon may have been working on the time-traveling properties of the Philosopher's Stone. In 1551, Gerardus Mercator gifted John Dee with 2 globes, a terrestrial and celestial. When overlaid, the constellation of Cassiopeia, the Virgin Queen of Heaven, was positioned over England. The constellation of Cygnus, the Swan, containing the asterism of the Northern Cross, symbolizing the rising spirit of Apollo, the sun god, was situated on the east coast of North America. It was in North America, in Arcadia, that Dee wanted to remake and reestablish Camelot as a utopic egalitarian society. It's the reason he invested so heavily in the exploration and colonization of the New World. It was a relatively easy astrological matter for him to sell Queen Elizabeth I on the idea that, as Cassiopeia was the Virgin Queen of Heaven, she, Elizabeth, was the Virgin Queen on earth, the reflection and embodiment of the Queen of the physical world, actualizing the axiom, as above, so below. Cygnus over North America, in concert with the Arthurian legend connection and voyages of Saint Brendan and Prince Medoc, gave England, or as Dee coined it, the British Empire, the right to colonize and expand its realm into the New World. Thus, Dee was able to garner support of the crown and financial backing for his North American endeavors. A while back, I discovered that the working tools of Freemasonry are components of a clock set to 3 o'clock. There were indications that the clock was the one in St. Augustine's Tower at the Church of St. John at Hackney, situated in the church gardens in the Hackney section of northeast London. At the time, I was clueless as to why it would be important and captured in Freemasonry. The church was built by the Templars and originally known as St. Augustine's. St. Augustine's writings were a Rosicrucian inspiration. After 1308, the church became a priory for the Order of St. John of Jerusalem, the Hospitallers, and was dedicated to St. John the Baptist and changed its name to St. John at Hackney. A clock was installed in the tower in about the 1580s. It has skulls and hourglasses graven upon stone panels beside its entrance, suggesting terrestrial time and mortality. Why would a clock involve the Philosopher's Stone, potentially symbolizing terrestrial time and mortality, be installed in St. Augustine's Tower at the Church of St. John at Hackney? The answer is Edward de Vere, the 17th Earl of Oxford. Edward de Vere was a colleague of both Dee and Bacon, an alchemist involved with creating the Philosopher's Stone and a Rosicrucian. He married his second wife, Elizabeth Trentham, on December 27, 1591, St. John the Evangelist's feast day. Elizabeth Trentham was a maid of honor to Queen Elizabeth I. It's possible that the Dark Lady of Shakespeare's sonnets was Elizabeth Trentham. The family's principal home was King's Place in Hackney, a substantial country manor house with a celebrated great hall, a classic Tudor long gallery, a chapel, and a proper library to lay books in. The land comprised orchards and fine gardens and some 270 acres of farmland. Edward de Vere died on June 24, 1604, St. John the Baptist feast day. In April of 1609, Elizabeth sold King's Place to Lord Fulk Greville, a founding Rosicrucian. It appears Elizabeth Trentham died on December 27, 1612, again, St. John the Evangelist's feast day. St. John the Evangelist has often had the appearance of a woman. Both June 24th and St. John the Evangelist's feast day and December 27th, St. John the Baptist's feast day, hold significance for both Rosicrucians and Freemasons. Edward de Vere and his wife, Elizabeth Trenholm, are both interred at the Church of St. John at Hackney. The Newport Tower in Newport, Rhode Island, is an enigma whose origin is subject to much speculation and vigorous debate. According to Jim Egan, the Newport Tower is John Dee's 1583 New World Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Dr. John Dee, Queen Elizabeth I's advisor and astrologer, had the Newport Tower that functions as a horologium, an astronomical or celestial clock, constructed in 1583, about the same time that a clock was installed in St. Augustine's Tower at the Church of St. John at Hackney. The idea of a terrestrial clock outside of London, not far from the Astronomical Observatory in Greenwich, where terrestrial time is measured from, and a celestial clock at Newport, Rhode Island, mirrors the overlay of the terrestrial and celestial globes given to Dee by Gerardus Mercator. In Masonic lodges, we find celestial and terrestrial globes atop two pillars. Masons are taught that these pillars symbolize the pillars of Boaz and Jachin that stood at the entrance to the first temple of Solomon. However, the pillars likely mark the extent of the British Empire as conceived by Dee. That Dee, Bacon, and their alchemy cohorts were creating and possibly using the Philosopher's Stone for time travel becomes apparent in the frontispiece for Bacon's 1620 treatise Novum Organum, depicting ships traveling beyond two pillars, representing St. Augustine's Tower and the Newport Tower. In other words, the ships are traveling beyond terrestrial and celestial time into an inner space, the interior of the mind, consciousness. What is intriguing is that when we visualize electromagnetic waves, we depict them as concentric circles or spirals, given their polarity. Across the globe, we find glyphs of concentric circles and spirals made by ancient cultures. They're often alleged to be shamanic representations of a journey. How did concentric circles and spirals become associated with such a journey? During a visit to the Canyon of the Ancients in Colorado, I stumbled upon a site that piqued my curiosity. I noticed what appeared to be glyphs etched on the wall of a narrow crevice. Carefully climbing down to the crevice floor for a closer look, I found glyphs of spirals and concentric circles and an exit. Exiting the rock wall through the crevice, I came into an open area that faced what appeared to be an altar, overarched by three large triangular-shaped boulders. Powdery gray ash mixed with an orangish-colored sand covered the ground around the altar, but there were no remnants of charred wood. To the east was another entrance between two boulders. To my astonishment, in the west, there was what appeared to be a humanoid face carved out of the rock. Whether the face is that of an ancient Puebloan, a visiting alien, a Templar, or a Spaniard, I can only imagine and won't speculate. Neither can I say with certainty if the site was astronomically aligned with the solstices or the equinoxes, though it appeared to be. Regardless, the site exuded a palpable energy and was clearly of ceremonial significance, commanding reverence and respect. Returning to the glyphs in the crevice, I pondered the meaning of the concentric circles and spirals and the journey they suggested. Did they represent a journey among the stars or another dimension? The journey of a visitor from another dimension or the stars to Earth? An interdimensional time traveler, perhaps? Was it possible that the concentric circles and spiral glyphs and the overarching triangular boulders represented Orion's belt stars? If it was a visitor from beyond, did they use a stargate such as the one depicted in Mesopotamian cylinder seals? I don't know. I wish I knew the Native American oral history of the site. What I can share is that it was a powerful, awe-inspiring experience I won't forget. Another aspect of the stone found using the geometry model of its 3D components is that it's analogous to a mathematical virology model of a biophagous organism, a bacteriophage, that derives its nourishment for its existence from another organism. This can be seen in an article by Redden Twerrock in Philosophical Transactions of the Royal Society. Bacteriophages, a virus known as marine phages, are introduced to Earth as organic space matter. They become the most abundant DNA replicating agent in the primordial soup for the evolution of life on Earth. Therefore, TL equals MC squared equals E, and it speaks to the first cause argument. Scientific acceptance of the idea that space matter contains biological organisms is a profound statement, one acknowledging that there is life in the universe beyond Earth, that we are not alone. It opens Pandora's box to a plethora of questions that are easier to deflect or ignore, as we aren't able to explain them reasonably or scientifically. The implication is that the stone symbolizes the seed of life, also known as the elixir of life. As such, the stone provides a means for panspermia, seeding life on alien worlds. So, how is panspermia achieved? The 3D racetrack form of an oblong square impresses as a virus its seed-like, egg-like capsule. Such a capsule can withstand extremes of temperature, external pressure, the rigors of space travel, and could be deployed for panspermia. The Philosopher's Stone symbolizes the transformation of our heart and our mind as we become better than we once were. We begin as a union of opposites that creates a divine spark called love. Charity is love in action. Our heart is the first organ of our physical, terrestrial body to form. It pumps life-sustaining blood throughout a tree-like network of arteries, veins, and capillaries, our circulatory system. The roots of the tree of life are a metaphor for our heart. The white stone is our abstract celestial mind. It forms the branches of the tree of life as our central nervous system and is a metaphor for the tree of knowledge. The Greek letter epsilon is at the top of the pediment of the Temple of Apollo at Delphi. Its three horizontal lines upon a single vertical line represent the union of body, mind, and soul bound by our spirit. Also inscribed on the pediment is "Know thyself." Perhaps the stone as a vehicle for spiritual transformation, as a means of travel in the space-time continuum, and as the elixir of life, can be described using the equation E equals TL equals MC squared that speaks to the first cause argument, transformation, consciousness, and ultimately, know thyself. Metaphorically, we are Adam in the Garden of Eden, a pigment of inner space, imagination that's a microcosm within the macrocosm of the cosmos. We began this video with a discussion of the Garden of Eden and the serpent. A serpent has no apparent gender, has a forked tongue, is perceived as neutral and unemotional, and is often hidden. As such, a serpent symbolizes the duality of nature, the tree of knowledge intertwined with the tree of life, signifying a sentient being. Man is celestial and terrestrial, positive and negative, good and bad, beautiful and ugly, the cycle of life and death. A serpent symbolizes hidden truths, our spine, the middle pillar. The tree of knowledge and the tree of life are intertwined and codependent, symbolizing the duality of nature and the universe that balances opposites to achieve unity, harmony, and peace. Nature and the universe just are. They're neutral and unemotional. Like the serpent, nature and the universe aren't concerned with the idea of good or evil, only existence in accordance with the law of entropy. We've talked at length about alchemy, the Philosopher's Stone, the unified field, laws, theories, and equations, spiritual transformation, travel in the space-time continuum, panspermia, and such. But what does it all mean? What's our takeaway? There's a voiceover by Alchemy, played by Dakota Fanning, in Steven Spielberg's TV series Taken. It goes like this. My mother always talked to me a lot about the sky. She liked to watch the clouds in the day and the stars at night, especially the stars. We would play a game sometimes, a game called What's Beyond the Sky. We would imagine darkness or a blinding light or something else that we didn't know how to name. But, of course, that was just a game. There's nothing beyond the sky. The sky just is. And it goes on and on and on. And we play all of our games beneath it. I wonder, is consciousness like the sky? What is consciousness? Succinctly, consciousness is awareness of internal and external existence. Beyond that, consciousness, though it has been analyzed and studied for millennia, is not clearly operationally defined and remains open to interpretation. If our mind is a transceiver, perhaps studying consciousness can be defined as exploring the jungle of our mind, our inner space, in response to vibrations perceived by our five senses. Here's the thought. If we are unconscious, we are theoretically devoid of awareness. So, is consciousness being aware of a sentient form of energy? If consciousness is a sentient form of energy, what happens when we die? Einstein's general theory of relativity suggests energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only be changed from one form to another. Does consciousness therefore qualify as our spirit, binding our mind and body, guarding our soul? If so, how does it manifest? In his book, A New Earth, Eckhart Tolle writes, "The fires of suffering become the light of consciousness. Suffering drives you deeper. A lot of it is caused by the ego. Although eventually suffering destroys the ego, but not until you suffer consciously. Suffering has a noble purpose, the evolution of consciousness and the burning up of the ego. The truth is that you need to say yes to suffering before you can transcend it. Suffering is therefore an element of metamorphosis and therefore metempsychosis. It's part of a slow, often painful transition from one state of being or consciousness to another. We are born and we must die if we are to be reborn, regenerated as something different, conceivably better than we once were. Whether that death is physical, mental, emotional, or spiritual, death is a part of life and necessary for our regeneration. It's the law of entropy. Before discussing resurrection or rebirth further, it's important we understand how these words are defined. Resurrection is defined as rising again to life after being dead, the act of being resuscitated. Rebirth is defined as a revival, a second chance, or spiritual regeneration. It is a new or second birth which involves metempsychosis, meaning the passing of the soul at death into another body, either human or animal. So, while resurrection and rebirth may appear synonymous, their nuanced connotations are quite different. For example, when we say Jesus was resurrected after being crucified, what we're saying is that he was brought back to life from unconsciousness or apparent death, that he was resuscitated. When Jesus died, we also say that he was reborn, referring to his spiritual regeneration. What we ignore is the implication that at death, his soul transferred to another body, possibly human, but could be any animal, vegetable, or mineral. It's this transference of the soul metempsychosis that provides for life everlasting through reincarnation in accordance with Buddhist doctrine. Reincarnation is an intriguing concept. There are several ways that it can be viewed. In one regard, we could argue that when we are born in the image of our parents and our ancestors. At conception, the energy of our parents' genetic makeup is converted through their DNA. We are a reproduction of our parents, created in their image, receiving half of our genetic makeup from our mother and half from our father. Our parents and ancestors, in theory, are reborn and will continue to live on through us and our descendants after they die. So long as we continue to propagate, our ancestors and parents will enjoy everlasting life. Another way of considering reincarnation is using a vessel of water as an analogy. Let's say that you have a vessel of water. The vessel represents your body. The water represents your mind, your personality and life force, your spirit. What happens if you drop the vessel of water and it breaks? What happens if the vessel of water has deteriorated with age and crumbles into pieces? The broken vessel at some point returns to the earth where it's repurposed. It might continue to deteriorate to become food for animals or plants or maybe something altogether different. Ultimately, it will become something other than what it once was. The vessel, our body, will not be in the same physical form we once recognized, but it will be repurposed and always continue to exist. This holds true for the water that was in the vessel too. The water doesn't cease to exist just because we drink it or it spills out of a broken vessel. All water evaporates at some point, rises into the atmosphere, and returns to Earth, repurposed as something else. It's a never-ending cycle. Let's think about Egypt for a moment. The ancient Egyptians held a strong belief in the afterlife. They believed that our physical body, contained our personality, Ba, and our spiritual life force, our soul, Ka. When we die, our Ba and Ka leave our body and they fly off. During the day, our Ba keeps watch over and protects our family, and our Ka goes to the land of two fields, so that our Ba and Ka can find their way home to our body. Our tomb must have our name engraved upon it in a cartouche. Otherwise, our Ba and Ka would be lost forever. We would disappear and cease to exist. Picture in your mind a mummy. Does its sarcophagus have the appearance of a capsule, an egg, a seed? Yes, it does, representative of an oblong square. Now think about how a battery works. A battery uses a chemical reaction between alkaline and acidic sources to produce electricity. Our body does the same. During the mummification process, organs are removed from the body. The body is then placed in natrum and dehydrated. Natrum is a very dry salt consisting of sodium bicarbonate and sodium chloride. It's alkaline and removes all water and oxygen from the body, leaving only carbon-based matter. The body is then wrapped in linen, anointed with oils that are acidic, and placed in the sarcophagus. The chemical reaction between alkaline and acidic chemicals produces hydrogen. Hydrogen has only one electron and easily bonds with other elements. Its atomic number is 1. It's the most abundant element in the universe. In living matter, it's found in conjunction with carbon and oxygen. Hydrogen is found in the oceans along with oxygen, sodium, and chlorine. So, we have the chemical composition of our oblong square as the Philosopher's Stone. Hydrogen and oxygen bond to create water. Sodium and chlorine bond to create salt and carbon. Could hydrogen contain our spirit and soul? It's possible that our spirit and soul are encapsulated in a hydrogen molecule, H2. Hydrogen is an energy carrier, not a source of energy, as it must be produced. This could occur at death if water electrolysis is employed, such as in mummification, that separates hydrogen from oxygen. It also explains the Egyptian concept of the spirit and soul as consisting of two parts, Ka and Ba. Think of resurrection in electromechanical terms as an alternator in your car. When it's new, it works great. Your battery stays charged. In time, the alternator's brushes wear down until it no longer works. Your battery doesn't retain a charge any longer, and it dies. Your car is essentially dead until you repair or replace the alternator and recharge the battery, resurrecting it. Life has environmental needs that must be met for sustainability. Secondly, in accordance with laws of thermodynamics, conservation, and entropy, energy cannot be created or destroyed, but it can be repurposed in order to expand. Let's say we have a soul. In the physical world here on Earth, a soul is conceived and contained within a physical mind and body bound by our spirit. If we consider a soul as a hydrogen discharge of positive and negative chemical forces, we become a battery discharging hydrogen in response to the cycles of nature. It oscillates as alternating current. Tesla was right. So was Einstein. But our linear concept of time, space, and dimension are relative only to man on Earth. They don't necessarily apply to a universal time because they are man-made constructs applicable only to Earth's relationship with its sun. In that regard, it's microcosmic and not applicable in a macrocosmic context of the universe. When a union of opposites occurs, energy is transferred and merged in a spark of divine love, creating a pocket of order, enabling chaos to expand in accordance with the laws of thermodynamics. A soul, a point within a circle, is formed and life begins. We have an expansion of mind and body bound by spirit, encapsulating a soul that grows as consciousness within the spirit of the universal womb. As the mind, body, and spirit age, they deteriorate and ultimately collapse, death. The soul is released from its physical, mortal bounds and returns to its primal state of divine love within the universal womb, where it is reconstituted. Regeneration. This is the regenerative cycle of nature: life, death, and rebirth. As an equation, it's expressed as alpha, omega, alpha, and symbolized graphically as an Ouroboros. In contrast with rebirth, resurrection is for the living. It's a process of transformation, metamorphosis, that often includes pain and suffering caused by ego. Transcending our physical limitations through meditation, we circle back to a spiritual transformation. Meditation enables us to atone, destroy our ego, and bow our head to our feet in humility, allowing energy to awaken in the Kundalini at the base of our spine and flow through the chakras as inner peace. It's a beginning of life without end. Life everlasting, eternity, that is a vehicle to achieve oneness with the universe. As such, the equation for resurrection is alpha alpha, signifying a beginning without end, and life everlasting, symbolized as a point within a circle, denoting an umphalos, our soul and our spirit, our ka and ba, manifesting as a hydrogen molecule, a star tetrahedron known as a Merkaba, found within the inner space of the Philosopher's Stone. Universal consciousness. Plato described 5 Platonic solids employed in our model of the Philosopher's Stone. But what if there's another way of looking at it? Rudolf Steiner suggests that there's a 6th Platonic solid. Inspired by Steiner, Frank Chester figured out how to design a 7-sided regular form with surfaces of equal area called a chestahedron. According to Chester, a chestahedron is constructed of 4 equilateral triangles and 3 kite shapes, quadrilaterals, that unite the 5 Platonic solids. Its geometry consists of 2 vortexes, one inside the other, using 22.5 degrees of arc found in the center of the conical form. 2 cones form at equal angles of 26 degrees. One cone fits over the 7-sided form and touches all vertices. The same cone can fit within and extends to the apex. Spinning the chestahedron creates a bell shape with 2 cones spinning in opposite directions. It's a design that allows counterclockwise and clockwise forces to work together in a balanced way and, at the same time, promote vortex movement. The chestahedron was developed from a tetrahedron, turning inside a cube whose axis is centered at the square root of 3, and the square root of 3 in the cube is 36 degrees of arc from the horizontal plane. When the tetrahedron reaches the midpoint of the cube, the resulting form is an octahedron with 1 invariant point. Frank has discovered that the chestahedron relates directly and exactly to each of the Platonic solids. He has also realized that some unique properties of the chestahedron that require us to think differently about the nature of the Platonic solids in general, and how they are formed. He has discovered that the Platonic forms can be created through a phenomenologically based serial transformation, beginning with the tetrahedron, rather than requiring them to be paired only with their duals. The serial transformation occurs through the principle of truncation, contractions, as follows. A tetrahedron's points are truncated. Technically, this is known as rectifying the tetrahedron. This yields the octahedron as a transitional form halfway between the tetrahedron and its dual, which is itself. When the octahedron's points are truncated, its dual, the cube, arises. Truncation of the cube only yields the octahedron again, but Frank has found that the cube can transform into the dodecahedron if, instead of pushing points into planes, the lines of the cube are pushed into planes. Finally, the dodecahedron points are truncated to yield the icosahedron. The order of the Platonic solids can thus be tetrahedron, octahedron, cube, dodecahedron, and icosahedron. What is important about this sequence is that it uses the contractive principle of truncation to phenomenologically yield a coherent and complete transformative sequence which all of the Platonic solids. This is a new way of working with these forms and their order. In both Western and Eastern traditions, different orderings were used, but Frank's is the first sequence based on phenomenological, not abstract or concept-based transformations of the forms. How does this contractive sequencing of the Platonic solids relate to the chestahedron? We can begin to address this question by noticing that the contractive sequence is only one side of a larger complementary that is balanced by expansive movements. The chestahedron is unique in that it can be created from a tetrahedron in two complementary ways, one contractive, the other expansive. The contractive method works by taking the tetrahedron and spinning it like a vortex within a cube. This procedure has real symbolic significance, as the Platonic solids have been associated with the four elements thought to be principles underlying the creation of the material world since antiquity. The tetrahedron is fire, the octahedron is air, the icosahedron is water, the cube is earth, and the dodecahedron is the universe, consciousness, or simply the fifth element. The tetrahedron was identified by Plato in his Timaeus as the most fundamental of the forms, in part because it is the simplest, having the least volume to surface area ratio. The contractive mode of creating the chestahedron requires putting the fire in the earth and transforming the fire through a vortexial or spiral motion. This is exactly the same pattern identified as the archetype of alchemical transformation. When we understand the symbolic nature of fire and earth as will and body, process and product, activity and rest, we can see how the chestahedron comes into existence as a balancing between these two complementary poles through their unification as a single transformative movement. But the the chestahedron can also be created in another way, by taking the tetrahedron and opening it up like a flower. This expansive process yields the chestahedron as an intermediate form between the tetrahedron and another tetrahedron that has sides of exactly double the original. Frank has discovered that by keeping the digital angle, the angle made by the meeting of two faces, constant through the unfolding process, a series of new forms are created that require the faces to become concave, as a force of suction inside the form, where drawing the faces towards its center. Each of these new forms is still based on a seven-sided form, just like the tetrahedron, made of 3 kite shapes and 4 equilateral triangles. But the kite-shaped faces become concave. The significance of this process is that it allows Frank to see how the seven-sided form is an archetype that appears in all the other Platonic forms. In other words, all the Platonic forms are unified by the way they relate to the archetype of the seven-sided form. This expansive process offers a balance to the contractive process. Together, they paint a more comprehensive picture of the creation of form in general through the balancing relations that occur across the boundary between the two polarities. In other words, the task, even in geometry, is to harmonize the contractive and the expansive, the material and the spiritual, the seen and the unseen. The archetype of the seven-sided form relates directly to both the contractive and expansive poles of creation as a mediator between them. But what is most significant is that through its morphology, it yields a particular form, the chestahedron. The chestahedron is the one seven-sided form that has faces of equal area. It's therefore the form that most represents a harmonic balancing between the material and the spiritual, between the contractive and expansive processes of creation. Initially, it appears that a chestahedron isn't featured in Meyer's illustration, but it is. It's hidden in plain sight, disguised as the tower. When we consider a 3D model of Meyer's illustration encapsulated within a chestahedron, it presents as a crystal, as a stone that embodies the 7 laws of the universe. Reflecting on Genesis 1, verses 1 to 3, that state, "In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, 'Let there be light,' and there was light." Is it possible that the Philosopher's Stone embodies creation of the universe, of life? Does it also embody the power to destroy it? Did Michael Meyer accurately describe the Philosopher's Stone? Historically, there are very few who are rumored to have created the Philosopher's Stone. Among the earliest are Cleopatra the Alchemist, Mary the Jewess, Tefnutia, and Madeira, and possibly Zosmus of Panopolis in the 4th century Egypt. Nicholas Flamel is legendary as a 14th century alchemist who allegedly created the stone and achieved immortality through the elixir of life. Unfortunately, the veracity of these claims is specious. However, the deaths of Sir Francis Bacon, Christopher Marlowe, and Edward de Vere, contemporary alchemist colleagues pursuing the Philosopher's Stone, are suspicious and rumored to have been faked. If true, what became of them? Did they create and use the stone to disappear? Given that Bacon's treatise, Novum Organum, was published in 1620, several years after the alleged deaths of Marlowe and de Vere, and its frontispiece alludes to time travel, could the two ships depicted in the inner space ocean between the terrestrial and celestial pillars symbolize that Marlowe and de Vere traveled in time? Sir Francis Bacon was born into conspiracy on January 22nd, 1560 or 61, at York House off the Strand, London, to Queen Elizabeth I and Sir Robert Dudley, Lord Denbigh, 1st Earl of Leicester, and the day after they were secretly wed. Documents demonstrate Queen Elizabeth I and Sir Robert Dudley were secretly married. They took vows of silence and secrecy to conceal and never reveal their marriage or their child. The 1895 edition of the British Dictionary of National Biography, Volume 16 on page 114, under the heading Dudley, states, "It is herein recorded that on January 21st, 1560 or 61, Queen Elizabeth was secretly married to Robert Dudley in the house of Lord Pembroke before a number of witnesses." Lord Pembroke was Sir William Herbert, Knight of the Garter and on the Privy Council, the 1st Earl of Pembroke of the 10th creation, guardian of Queen Elizabeth's younger brother, King Edward VI, and a colleague of the groom's father, Sir John Dudley. Lord Pembroke's house was Baynard's Castle in London. Whatever were the Queen's relations with Dudley before his wife's death, they became closer afterward. It was reported that she was formally betrothed to him and that she had secretly married him in Lord Pembroke's house, and that she was a mother already. Immediately upon his birth, Sir Francis became a ward of the court. Sir Nicholas Bacon, Lord Keeper of the Great Seal, and Lady Anne Bacon, formerly known as Lady Anne Cook, Queen Elizabeth's first leading lady in waiting, were charged with raising Sir Francis as their own. When Sir Nicholas Bacon died in 1579, Sir Francis became a ward of Sir William Cecil, the Queen's chief advisor and Secretary of State, and his Lady Mildred Cecil, formerly known as Cook, who was Anne Bacon's sister and therefore Sir Francis's adoptive maternal aunt. Dee first met Francis Bacon, who had recently attained his majority and learned that his biological parents were Queen Elizabeth I and Sir Robert Dudley, at Dee's estate at Mortlake to discuss gematria. Bacon, like Thomas Digges, soon became a Dee protege. Although Sir Francis Bacon was a favorite at court and enjoyed unique privileges and access to her, Queen Elizabeth I never officially recognized Sir Francis Bacon as her son and legitimate heir to the throne before she died in 1603. Bacon allegedly died at age 65 of pneumonia on April 9, 1626, as a result of one last odd scientific experiment, stuffing a chicken with snow to see if it would preserve the meat. Allegedly, he died at Arundel Mansion, the home of Thomas Howard, 14th Earl of Arundel, in Highgate, Middlesex, England. Upon his death, 32 great minds collected together their eulogies of him. Published in Latin, his peers referred to him as a supreme poet and a concealed poet, linking him with the theater and a suggestion that he was indeed Shakespeare. An interesting point pertaining to Bacon's death is that his biography of Sir Francis Bacon, Basil Montague, states, "Of his funeral, no account can be found, nor is there any trace of the site of the house where he died." Allegedly, Sir Francis Bacon was interred at St. Michael's Church at Gorhambury, St. Albans, in Hertfordshire, England, where there is a white marble monument to him over his vault in the chancel. In 1649, Bacon's vault was opened during Sir Thomas Mudie's funeral and was found to contain bones. The bones were assumed to be those of Sir Francis Bacon. In October 1681, Sir Harbottle Grimston removed Bacon's coffin to make room for his own. It's not known what Sir Harbottle did with Bacon's coffin and its remains, as it hasn't been recorded. As the disposition of these remains are unknown, DNA testing cannot be performed to confirm or refute that they were indeed Bacon's. Circumstances surrounding the alleged death and burial of Sir Francis Bacon in 1626 are curious at best. Consequently, it's rumored that Bacon faked his death. According to Wikipedia, Bacon is alleged to have faked his own death, crossed the English Channel, and secretly traveled in disguise after 1626 through France, Germany, Poland, and Hungary, and other areas, utilizing the secret network of Freemasons and Rosicrucians that he was associated with. It's alleged that he continued to write under pseudonyms, as he had done before 1626, continuing to write as late as 1670, using the pseudonym Comte de Gabaus. Eleanor von Lecoq, wife of Professor von Lecoq in Berlin, stated that she had found evidence in the German archives that Francis Bacon stayed after 1626 with the family of Johannes Valentinus André in Germany. It's also claimed that Francis Bacon never died, that he traveled extensively outside of England, eventually becoming an ascended master and assuming the name of Saint Germain in a castle owned by the Rákóczi family in Transylvania. It's also suspected that there's a connection between Bacon and Oak Island in Nova Scotia in Canada. There's a theory that Shakespeare's or Bacon's writings might be buried at Oak Island, and the possibility that Bacon himself may have gone there. As evidence, a scrap of parchment was recovered from the money pit area that has what appears to be a VI on it. Why would Bacon consider traveling to the New World? In his essay of Travail, he tells us that he considered travel as part of an elder's experience, and he was 65. His motive was his romantic sense of adventure, inspired by his involvement with the Virginia Company as early as 1606, that he was a member of and whose second charter he helped draft and sign in 1609. Bacon was also an active participant and financier of the Bristol Society of Merchant Venturers that formed the Newfoundland Company in 1607 that established a plantation colony at Cupid's Cove in 1610 with expectations of finding exportable minerals. At about the same time, a French expedition led by Pierre Dubois, Sire du Mons, with Samuel de Champlain as geographer and cartographer, arrived off the coast of Nova Scotia, referred to as Arcady, Acadia, or Arcadia, and established a settlement on St. Croix Island and a defensive structure and a trading post at Port Royal. Bacon was further inspired by stories brought back by adventurers to and explorers of the New World, such as those related by Captain John Smith and those in the History of Travail into Virginia, Britannia, dedicated to and given him by its author, R.H. Major. More than likely, Bacon also met with the Powhatan princess from Virginia, Pocahontas, during her 9-month visit to London between 1616 and 1617. Sadly, as she began her return voyage to Virginia, Pocahontas died at Gravesend on the River Thames and was subsequently buried there at the parish church of St. George. Bacon must have pondered the New World considerably, fantasizing about Arcadia as a place to establish a utopic egalitarian society where, as he writes in New Atlantis in his final days, members of the House of Solomon can travel throughout the kingdom, invent divine natural disasters, and offer good counsel to the people. In those final days, Sir Francis Bacon thought of nothing but writing and the possibility of travel in foreign countries. Bacon had frittered away his wealth on bad investments and was deep in debt. He was no longer welcome at court or parliament, considered dottery, and almost lost his titles for accepting bribes from litigants. It was a sad ending to so great and good a man as Sir Francis Bacon, the secret prince of the White Rose, the man who would be king but was denied. As entered apprentices, Freemasons are taught a lesson in charity, that if they should ever see a friend, but more especially a brother, in such destitute condition, that they should contribute as liberally to his support and relief as his necessities may require and their ability permits. At his end, perhaps Sir Francis Bacon decided to leave all the double toil and trouble, fire burn and cauldron bubble of not so merry old England for Arcadia. Perhaps his intent to do so was foretold early on in Shakespeare's Hamlet, Act 3, Scene 1. Keep in mind that, according to Peter Amundsen, William Shakespeare was a straw man for Sir Francis Bacon. In modern English, Act 3, Scene 1 of Hamlet reads thus: "After all, who would put up with all life's humiliations, the abuse from superiors, the insults of arrogant men, the pangs of unrequited love, the inefficiency of the legal system, the rudeness of people in office, and the mistreatment of good people have to take from the bad, when you could simply take out your knife and call it quits? Who would choose to grunt and sweat through an exhausting life unless they were afraid of something dreadful after death? The undiscovered country from which no visitor returns, which we wonder about without getting any answers from, and which makes us stick to the evils we know rather than rush off to seek the ones we don't. Fear of death makes us all cowards, and our natural boldness becomes weak with too much thinking. Actions that should be carried out at once get misdirected and stop being actions at all. But shh, here comes the beautiful Ophelia. Pretty lady, please remember me when you pray." You may be wondering how this passage from Hamlet has anything to do with Sir Francis Bacon. It may be helpful to know that while Masons generally assume that the phrase, "we are traveling on the broad level of time to that undiscovered country from whose bourne no traveler returns," used in the Fellowcraft lecture is Masonic, it's not. It's lifted from the above passage in Hamlet. As a further evidence, Ophelia is of Greek origin and means help or benefit. The character as Ophelia is first introduced in Jacopo Sannazzaro's 1504 romantic pastoral poem, Arcadia. In the poem, Sannazaro, disappointed in love, withdraws from Naples to pursue an idealized pastoral existence among shepherd poets in the lost world of Arcadia, a source of inspiration for Poussin's esoteric painting, Les Berges d'Arcadie, better known as Shepherds in Arcadia, that has et in Arcadia ego, meaning even in Arcadia, there am I, inscribed upon its crypt. Referring again to the frontispiece of Novum Organum, and the idea that it symbolizes Marlowe and De Vere as time travelers, it's not beyond the realm of possibilities that Bacon too was a time traveler. That he created the Philosopher's Stone and crossed over the threshold of time and space, traveling on the broad level of time to that undiscovered country from whose bourne no traveler returns. In closing, I'll leave you with a question and a thought. Is it possible that the Templars possessed the stone? If the stone doesn't exist, if it isn't real, if its seemingly magical properties are nothing more than fantasy, then why have the most intelligent and respected men throughout human history invested so much time and effort, risking everything in pursuit of its creation? What I've shared here are ideas and concepts that merit investigation to either validate or refute their viability. We must boldly go beyond where we are now. We must be intrepid travelers parting a veil of mystique, explorers stepping beyond the boundaries of perception into the uncharted jungle of our mind, daring to probe our quintessence. Consciousness, the Philosopher's Stone. It's the Holy Grail. It's the final frontier. Well, that wraps up this chapter. Thanks for watching. Join me next time as we continue our quest for the rest of the story. In the interim, be sure to visit my website at stonedtemplar.com and watch other videos on my YouTube channel. Take care of yourself and each other. Good day.